I'm very pleased to have Rahima Aziz to join us today. Thank you very much for coming. And Cindy Forde as well, who we do know because Cindy also we managed to bring onto the board of Global Philanthropic. We've got a bit of a quid pro quo thing going on with a new institute at Cambridge, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So we're going to have a little bit of a deep dive now into the next gen, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Rahim to talk about that. I'm sure we all know the work of the foundation. I think you're now nearly 10 years old. 650 scholarships have been funded across the university sector in the UK, fellowships, and I was hearing more and more about it. And I was chuckling to myself because I think it was your sisters, is it? I think that say they make all the money and you spend it, which I think is an interesting thought. So I'm going to start actually with some questions around the foundation and just asked, and thank you for sharing with this. It's a difficult thing to share. Maybe you could share with us the story of the foundation, how you got involved. I also believe that you just recently finished a course at UCL. So recently out of education and now helping others to access education. So maybe you could talk through the story of the foundation and how this evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
if we can hear. If not, you may have to hold the mic close.
Like that?
Maybe. Sorry, this is a bit odd. Mics that you have to hold that are meant to be on your lapel, but yes.
Thank you. So the story of the foundation, it's an interesting one. I think it goes long before my time. My family immigrated from India to Malawi in the 60s. And we're a Memon community, a very mercantile community, long-standing history in philanthropy, opening orphanages, schools, etc. It's just part and parcel of the community values. So my family were very fortunate. You know, my dad got very lucky. He worked very hard to be able to move us from Africa over to the UK. So, you know, I grew up never wanting for anything, but always being very aware of where our roots were, always being very aware of where we came from. He never really let us forget. And I'm so glad because I feel that I would be someone with a lot less perspective now had he not been so impressing of that upon us. And so the foundation was kind of his way of formalizing his philanthropic giving because it's always been something he's been interested in. He's a very, very private man, so his giving's always been very private. And he was always focusing on education generally, specifically outside of the UK, in Malawi, you know, because of where his family came from, and the level of poverty that still exists there to this day, and the lack of education, particularly for women. So when it came to formalizing that giving in the UK, he thought, you know, no better community to give back to than his own community, the British Muslim community. So the first few years of the foundation, you know, we were set up 2015. Funnily enough, we were set up on my 14th birthday, so I always kind of took that as a as a sign that it was the right path for me. So we were set up then. For the first few years, it was looking at kind of the different grants that we could do, the different organizations we could work with. But really, we wanted to do I say we, I was an infant, but we wanted to do like a strategic review of where can we focus this philanthropy to actually have a meaningful impact. So we looked deeper into education, and the postgraduate space is one where like there were hardly any Muslims. You see lots in the undergraduate space, and there's a massive fall from undergrad to postgrad. So that was an area that we kind of sunk our claws into pretty immediately. And we started, you know, linking up with different universities. I actually think I did see people from Goldsmiths in the room, which is really exciting because they're one of our fantastic partners. And basically just formalizing an arrangement with these universities so that we can say to them, you know, we'll send you our scholars. We've got great ones. We have great applicants. But let's formalize something where we can be assured that you will make sure their experience as a Muslim student is more than adequate. It's the best environment for them to be in, because you can't send people in blind. You can't send people into these same institutions that there's a reason maybe they haven't been going there. There's a reason there's a massive fall off in the postgraduate space. And I could go off on a tangent on that, but I won't waste everyone's time. But essentially, that's been the past 10 years of the foundation, moving more into the education space. We've given over 650 scholarships in the past, I guess, 5 years, really, because that's when our postgraduate program was formalized. And since then, we've expanded into internships with various organizations. We're trying to get more into spaces like law, technology, policy, really importantly to me, sustainability as well. That was one that when I became more of a force within the foundation, I said this is a non-negotiable, because if this foundation is for my generation and the next generation, we can't turn a blind eye to the biggest issue facing this generation, which is the climate issue. Something else I'm trying to bring in is more of a focus on mental health. My own professional background is in psychiatric healthcare. Since finishing at UCL, that's where I work now. I work in a psychiatric hospital, so I'm very keen on pushing that agenda into the next 10 years of the Aziz Foundation and seeing kind of where we can grow from that.
And do you sort of remember that when you were 14? Do you remember that? I mean, it seems to be Lady Edwina really focused in on this kind of moment, the moment, I'm now known it as the moment, when you get sat down and you kind of realise that wealth transfer is part of your responsibility. Edwina's spoken quite openly about how that felt and how it was structured, how the structure of the family had worked that out. So that was a discussion that was in the context of a good dialogue, to pick up on that point. Now, it sounds from outside that there was a very good dialogue going on, which I assume you're going to say yes to that anyway, because this is on film. But how did it, do you mind me asking, how did that feel? Or and maybe within the family, how did it feel that moment that it kind of dawned on you that you had this responsibility in philanthropy?
It really is an immense responsibility. It's one that I don't take lightly. I'm the youngest of all of my siblings, so when I turned around and said to my dad, actually, I'm not really interested in involving myself in your very successful business. In fact, I'd like to go work in a psychiatric hospital. His eyebrows shot up in the same way that I'm imagining it went down with Lady Edwina's father. He was like absolutely horrified, absolutely not. Thankfully for him, being part of the foundation was something I was still very involved in. It was interesting because my siblings are very much the running force behind the business. So it was crucial that we still have someone within the family running the foundation, because it really is, like you said, it's a massive responsibility. We want to make sure that it's our values being carried forward. And the idea of kind of being this next generation where this wealth transference is happening, it's quite immense. Sometimes it's a bit staggering to think that there is so much responsibility behind that. Philanthropy, I think, can be... maybe it's the wrong room to say this in, but it can be kind of dangerous, I think, if it's done incorrectly, because you have such an impact, and you need to be very wise about what you're doing with that impact, with essentially the power you have over communities and over people. So we don't take that lightly. It's been open dialogue all around, particularly with my father, because it's kind of a back and forth of him not really wanting me to be more, in the field of work I've chosen for myself, him wanting to be more involved with the foundation, and me saying, I will do, but let me have my own kind of life to build on, because I think you need to find your passion. You need to find the thing that you think is the voice of your generation. So open dialogue is important, because without it, I think we would be not the family that we are. And dialogue is one of the most important things for us. So it stops everyone from killing each other half the time.
I think it's a lovely example of a good dialogue. So we've got two great examples of a good dialogue. To elaborate on Edwina's point, and naming no names, but I think we know who we're talking about, it was very interesting in talking philanthropy in the private sessions, and there were literally tears. And it was about people's relationships with their fathers, their mothers. It was about difficult conversations. It was about control of what they're trying to do and how they trying to exercise their own independence in a framework. Obviously, Asia is very different in terms of that handing the family sort of business down as well. So there's a lot of really heavy stuff going on. So I think I could see yourself and Edwina have had the similar journey. Mental health is your area of passion. So Edwina, prisons, yours, mental health. So for the future of the foundation, because it will be you and your siblings that have that responsibility, do you have any further thoughts about what you personally, how you would personally like to develop the program and what you would like to do? Where's your perspective on the future? You've talked about environment, mental health. Do you have any other thoughts about, or elaboration of those thoughts about what you would like to do with the foundation?
I really would like to see the foundation moving into the next 10 years of really listening to what the community needs. I think the worst mistake you can make is particularly in philanthropy, is not listening to what the people who are in need are quite literally shouting in front of you. So for us, I have a great team at the foundation. We work really well together because everyone has their little spaces that they work in. They have their communities, their ears on the ground, constantly finding out what's the actual need, what are the issues, not just what we think they are and what we would like to involve ourselves in, and what kind of fits our agenda. More so, what is it that the actual need is? So that is kind of my idea for the next 10 years. I'd really like to see a vision for the foundation where we definitely focus on mental health. How we'll go about that, I don't know. I'm still finding my ways to weave it in, slowly but surely. Sustainability absolutely will be a big one. We're trying to work more with the grassroots organizations because it's not a space where you see many Muslims, but it's a space where Muslims need to be. It's such an essential part of the religion that it makes no sense that we're kind of not at the forefront of it as we should be. But yeah, absolutely, it's just listening to what the community needs. Because without that, the work you're doing it doesn't mean anything. That's
a really excellent. We're looking forward to seeing how that transpires. Can I also pick up on this point, and it's the reason that we've asked Cindy to come and talk about the environmental scenario, and we're having lots of different media messaging about how important this is or not, or it's a complex set of issues, and I'm just wondering what's your thoughts around that in terms of, as a philanthropist, and how we can tackle some of those issues that you mentioned?
In terms of sustainability?
Yeah.
It's such a huge question. It's one that, for the past 4 years, I feel like I've been turning over in my mind. Since involving myself more with the foundation, one of the key things I was trying to do was find out who was in the sustainability space, really put my own ear to the ground and see, what can actually be done or what's already been done or what's happening right now, so I'm not replicating things for no reason. But honestly, I don't know. It's been a couple of years of hits and misses, of crushing disappointment when you find out that some organizations you work with, everyone has such passion and they're really, really intent on doing the right thing, but it's like no one's working together properly. I feel like if we all put our heads together, it would make a lot more sense, but maybe you found the same thing. I feel like it's an issue there.
Great way to introduce Cindy, actually. And so thank you very much, Rahim, for that insight. So Cindy, as a speaker here, when we first talked about the next gen, your reply was, well, there probably won't be one, which, not quite like that, but there might not be one if we don't get our act together. So Cindy, maybe you could talk about your book and your work in the environmental space so that everyone's familiar with your work, and this issue about the next gen, which your book, for those that haven't read it, and I asked Cindy to bring a couple of copies, it's compulsory reading for 7 to 8-year-olds, I think, or 9-year-olds, and it tells a positive story of what can be done in the environmental space. So I think it's very important about the next gen. But Cindy, tell us what your thoughts are around this.
First of all, my thoughts are, I hope I can get this microphone to work, because I've slightly lost my voice today, so apologies in advance if I sound a little bit croaky. But thank you so much, Rahima. That was the wisdom that you bring is just so impressive. And, in a way, in a way, that is where the hope is, this absolutely brilliant generation who are coming up with a much more enlightened view of what wealth is and what we need to do to keep our world a very rich and beautiful place. So that is very much the work that I've been doing for the last 25 years. It feels long and it feels quite hard at times because there's been not anything like the progress that we would like to see. I don't think I need to mince words with anybody in this room. We know that we're in code red. We know every day, as Edwina mentioned, putting the radio on and having that feeling of overwhelm. There's so many things going wrong. But I think that is what makes it imperative to focus on the things that we can do. And I really appreciate your point again, Rahima. Things can feel very bitty. People are fixing up bits of rainforest over here and fixing up oceans over there, which is all very important. But I think our approach now needs to be very systemic. So in my work with children, I founded a small organization called Planetari, and there we're going to the root of things, which is how we think. So that's earth-led education. And we enable children to understand themselves as the stewards of this beautiful planet and to equip them to be the innovators and entrepreneurs of a brighter world. So my book is called Brighter World and invites them to step into a future that we can have, because with human brilliance and ingenuity, these things already exist. The biggest thing that we need to shift is how we think, and that comes back to education. So Ben, thank you very much. You're very kindly helping us to work on a project at Cambridge University that we're calling the Cambridge Centre for Systemic Change. And in a way, that's Planetari for big kids, because we're actually looking at how to enable the leaders of today and tomorrow to have this ability to think across Earth systems, whether they're engineers, whether they're medics, whether they're mental health practitioners, whether they're prison workers, and actually understand, what do we need to shift in our systems to deliver a world that is in line with our planetary boundaries, which really sets that is our boss. Earth is our boss. Everything needs to be designed in line with planet Earth now.
And when we were talking about, in the run-up to this discussion about how important this is and how bad things are, you've got a fairly strong view on this, aren't you, in terms of the urgency of moving?
Well, we have to really get our act together and move fast. I think there is absolutely every reason to hope, but without courage, to get to hope, we have to go through courage. I just came back from a trip, a conservation project in the Red Sea. Came back a couple of days ago. The 80% of the world's corals bleached last year. The Red Sea lost nearly all of its corals. I was taken to there's an absolutely brilliant project in KAUST University in Jeddah. They are doing phenomenal work to restore this, but they said, let's be honest with you, Cindy. We've got they took me through the labs where they've got these incredible corals, which they're working out how to enable to thrive in these tanks. But because the idea being you can graft the polyps back on, so if the temperatures reduce, you can regenerate the reefs. But the scientist there, she said, and the other thing that we are doing now is we're just collecting all the stocks that we can in case we cannot restore, but at least we've got some alive. And I was looking at this little coral in a tank doing this, pum, 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 and it was just beating like, my own heart, and that heart was on a life support system. And that the corals are the canaries in the mines. They're the nurseries of the ocean. If we lose the reefs, we lose the life, the source of life on Earth. So it is absolutely critical that we move, and we move fast. When you say, Ben, I don't think there's, it's as bleak to say there won't be a next gen, because there's human brilliance, the amount of power in this room, sitting next to you, hearing your wisdom, the work that you do, Lady Edwina. We are an incredible species. We just have to shift our values. What is wealth? Is it having a lot of financial capital? Yes, that's important, but what about the life support systems that keep us going? When we expand, as you see so much of the next generation doing, our capacity to understand wealth in terms of the natural world, then there's hope. If we have the courage to stand up and take the action that we need now, and to develop the competences through the education programs that I see happening. We're building one in Cambridge. I saw incredible things happening in KAUST. Then we can hope. Then we can have the right to hope, but we have to move through courage and competence to get there.
So, Cindy, everyone, I didn't give you an introduction in terms of your backgrounds, because it would have taken half an hour each. So what you have, Cindy, is, in a way, the work that you're doing is, in a way, from one extreme to the other, in that you're trying to intervene on the one-to-one child level to give a view about how children actually can help understand how they can be involved in changing this huge risk. At the other end of the scale, you're with the new institute at Cambridge University at Homerton College, of which you're a fellow. You're also trying to strategically intervene in terms of systemic change. So you're kind of doing both extremes of a practical intervention and a highly strategic intervention. But if you were advising philanthropists on how can they engage in this, we can see that there's a concern. How do they engage with it? What advice would you give to the next gen?
Well, I think, as Rahima said, I think it's really important to have the dialogue. You know, you've got to work from where your heart is, you know, what moves you, where are your passions, what will motivate you to get up and do this work that can be very hard, but it can also be tremendously rewarding. I say to the children that I work with, you know, this isn't such a bad time to be alive. This is an opportunity for incredible transformation. You know, forget about the super yachts and the planes and the jets. Who gets to learn how to fly a small planet? And that's what we have the opportunity now to do as a human family. And there's brilliant young philanthropists. In the interview that I saw that you did with Lady Edwina, you did that with Vasa Sale. I mean, she's committed her passion is the oceans. She has the Oxygen Project, and they're enabling, you know, massive scale transformation to happen. And there's huge joy in that. When we're talking about the Centre for Systemic Change at Homerton, is a really joyful enterprise, because people say, "Oh, Cindy, you work on the stuff that's really hard," but I work with absolutely most fantastic people who are making transformation happen. So for the next generation of philanthropists, you know, where is your passion? Where is your heart? Find that, and then find the people that are already doing that work. Consult with them. Find out how you can help to mobilize the work that's already happening, create new projects, as Vasa has done with her incredible work on deep sea mining, and make stuff happen, because that's where your own soul, food for your soul, comes from, when you're actually doing the things that you're making the change that you want to see in the world.
Inspirational as ever. Cindy, I'm going to have one last question, because I'm conscious of time, and because we're trying to pack so much in. We're not going to do Q&A, unfortunately, because we're going to leave that to networking at the end. But before I ask the last question to you both, we've worked with our charter to produce an actual piece of a document that we're sharing today, which is around the good news of that intergenerational wealth transfer. And we've got representatives from the United Nations Environmental Programme here as well, which Global Philanthropic has been working with, which has been a real eye-opener in terms of the kind of work that we've done. But that document also is quite encouraging in terms of the amount of money, potentially philanthropically, that is ahead of us to help drive towards some of these solutions that we have within our grasp. So that's certainly worth looking at. So we'll make sure that everyone gets the QR code, which comes into the last question that I'm going to ask you both, which is around the sort of digital age that we're now in. And I think someone told me a story that really resonated with me, which is about watching people get off a plane, probably because they haven't had their fix of, well, you now get it on planes, but in the old days, and everyone walks out of the plane and their phone's in front of their face, and they're kind of tripping over everything. They're walking into barriers, they're walking into each other, they're completely unaware that 300 people are getting off a plane because they're just engaged with their phone. And the reality is that the new world that we live in is there, and if we're going to engage the next gen, how do we seize the opportunity to communicate with them through the new medias that we've got? Because it is an opportunity as well as a barrier. So perhaps, you know, I said I might ask this question to you. I think I don't know if you have the answer, but maybe you don't have a mobile phone, and it's all right. But I doubt it. But what does the new digital age for your generation represent as an opportunity to communicate and engage?
Can I just say, as much as I do love my generation, the thing I like the least about it is probably the influence of social media and phones. I mean, I do have a phone, and I do use social media sparingly, but kind of against my will. I kind of despise it. I think nothing worse. You know, when you're out in public and you see like 2-3-year-olds and they're swiping through TikTok, and it just kind of makes you feel physically unwell in a way. Like, ugh. I equate that with the climate crisis. I'm like, this is a crisis in of itself. However, like you said, it's an opportunity, and I do try to look at it that way, because one of the areas we focus on in the Aziz Foundation with the scholarships is like technology, policy, and AI. We have lots of fantastic applicants who want to study AI. So begrudgingly in the interviews, I sit there and I listen to them talk about it, and I try and change my own mind because I see that there is so much potential. But I think regardless of my personal opinions of it, the best thing we can do is stay ahead of the game and be aware of the massive responsibility that comes alongside having access to so much information. It's scary, to be honest, especially with this new generation. The fact that all the AI and the deepfakes, all the things that you can do online. When I was a young teenager, you couldn't do half of that stuff. The most innovative thing was Instagram. Like, there was nothing bigger than that. So I think when we look to the next 10 years into this next generation, there is so much potential to use AI medically and to advance technology and, maybe even in the sustainability space. I'm sure there's so much we can do. It's just about being very, very conscious of the massive responsibility behind this. I didn't even know that ChatGPT, for example, it drains so much electricity and energy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What a horrifying realization. That's something that people don't realize enough. You see a trend about that online again, but that's where all of your influence comes from. It comes from what you're engaging with online. So we just need to be so aware of it every single time we engage with it, aware of kind of this crazy robot thing we have in front of us that we can use to our benefit, but we just have to be very careful, I think.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing your answer. Do you have anything, Cindy, to add to that as a final thought?
Just very quickly, I have a 21-year-old. I can't believe she's not a teenager anymore. But one thing I have noticed about the younger generation and the benefits of the digital age is how much more connected that they all are. And they actually see themselves so much more as a generation rather than as a nationality. And I think that's so positive that the human connection, bringing us together as a human family. I do completely acknowledge the mental health issues are absolutely critical. I think that it's devastating what you see happening with social media, and there is this small positive thing that is happening at the same time, that people are connecting, really seeing themselves for the first time as a human family, and it's in thinking like that we will solve the big global challenges that we face. So I do see that other reason to hope there too, Ben.
So what a pleasant way to end the conversation, full of hope. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your family's story. And thank you, Cindy, for sharing the challenges that we have ahead.